The wedding ceremony had already begun, but my groom, Ethan, was still in a corner with my best friend, Harper, discussing data from their latest lab experiment. Anxious and embarrassed, I pulled Ethan's arm, trying to drag him toward the stage. Ethan, the ceremony has started. Everyone is waiting. What? Ethan muttered, his eyes still fixed on his tablet. The wedding. Before I could even finish, Ethan cut me off. I wasn't talking to you. He turned back to Harper without missing a beat. What did you say the parameters were for the second trial? Harper gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder and whispered, Chloe, we're talking about a major scientific breakthrough here. Just go out there and handle the guests for now. It's just a wedding. Worst case, we can always throw you another one later. With that, the two of them dove back into a rapid-fire exchange of scientific jargon that sounded like gibberish to me. Getting more excited by the minute, they completely ignored me and the hundreds of staring guests. Suddenly, they stood up, knocked over the champagne tower, and rushed out the door to the lab. The glass shattered. Champagne soaked the train of my white dress. I was left standing on the stage alone, a complete mess. But this time, I wasn't going to clean up their mess. Host another wedding? No, thank you. Being the prodigy's bride? I quit. Ethan and Harper had been geniuses since they were kids. I was always just the tag-along. After college, they both became lead researchers at a prestigious biotech institute. And me? I was just the receptionist at the front desk of that very same institute. The three of us rented a house together. But in reality, I was their live-in maid. I did their laundry, cooked their meals, and was forever excluded from their intellectual conversations. I drove home alone from my abandoned wedding. At 2 a.m., the front door finally clicked open. Ethan and Harper walked in, laughing and talking loudly, completely uncaring that they had just woken me up. See, Ethan, I told you we needed to adjust the parameters my way. I was totally right. Ethan playfully pinched Harper's cheek, a competitive smirk on his lips. You just got lucky, babe. When they saw me standing in the hallway, Ethan casually tossed his dirty jacket onto the floor. Chloe, throw our clothes in the wash, will you? He said, not even looking at me. And make us some pasta. Harper is starving. He didn't care at all about how the wedding had ended. He didn't ask how I got home. I'm tired, I said coldly. It was the first time in our 7-year relationship that I had ever said no to him. Ethan froze, clearly surprised. Harper nudged his shoulder with her elbow, rolling her eyes. Oh, Ethan, you idiot. Your EQ is literally rock bottom. Can't you see Chloe is throwing a tantrum? You ignored her for the experiment today. She's mad. She lightly pinched Ethan's chest and laughed. All right. I punished him for you, Chloe. Stop being mad, bestie. Ethan groaned, rubbing his temples in annoyance. Chloe, we've been working in the lab for 12 hours straight. Can you please not make a scene? It's just a wedding. How could that ever be more important than our research? Honestly, no one cares about weddings except the bride. We'll throw you a better one later. But this wasn't the first time. 2 years ago, during our graduation trip, I waited at an international airport for 7 hours because Ethan and Harper got too caught up in a simulation. A year ago, at our engagement party, Harper called Ethan away because of an instrument malfunction, leaving me to apologize to 80 guests on my own. Over the past 6 months, I had scheduled 4 appointments at the courthouse for our marriage license. Ethan stood me up every time. Every time, his excuse was the same: the lab needed him. In their world of science, everything about me was completely trivial. What do you mean, just a wedding? I whispered, but my question went completely unheard. They were already huddled over a stack of papers on the kitchen island, lost in their own world again. Back then, everyone envied me. They said my fiancé and my best friend were brilliant. But I was done being a ghost in my own life. Quietly, I opened my phone. I submitted my resume to a few open positions in Chicago and bought a one-way train ticket. The next morning, Seattle was hit by a massive storm. The rain was pouring down in sheets. I ran downstairs, hoping to catch a ride to work with Ethan. Ethan was starting his Audi, talking animatedly with Harper, who was sitting in the passenger seat. I tapped frantically on the rain-streaked window, but he didn't even turn his head. He stepped on the gas and drove off. Ethan, wait. I chased the car for a few steps, slipped on the wet asphalt, and fell hard, scraping my elbow. The car didn't stop. Whenever Harper was around, Ethan became completely blind to my existence. I wiped the blood and mud off my arm with a tissue and dragged myself to the subway station. By the time I reached the institute, I was late. Ethan and Harper walked past the reception desk. When Ethan saw me, the smile slid off his face, replaced by a deep scowl. Is this how you do your job? Do you know what time it is? Why didn't you wait for me this morning? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Before Ethan could answer, Harper chimed in. Oh, Chloe, don't blame Ethan. You don't work in research, so you don't get it. Every second in the lab is crucial. We literally don't have time to waste waiting around. She patted my shoulder with a patronizing smile. Ethan sighed, looking at me like I was a difficult child. You knew it was raining. Why didn't you leave earlier? Since we were kids, I've told you to be more disciplined. Why can't you ever listen? I don't expect you to be a genius like Harper, but is it really that hard to just be a receptionist? But when Harper forgot her purse, Ethan would patiently wait for her for an hour, laughing and calling her a genius in the lab, but a clumsy little princess in real life. At that moment, I lost all desire to argue. Suddenly, Ethan took a sharp step back, pretending he didn't know me. Another colleague was walking by. Ethan had always insisted we keep our relationship strictly professional, at work to avoid gossip. But the passing colleague stopped and smirked at Ethan and Harper. Oh, look, Dr. Miller and Dr. Vance. The golden couple of our institute is arriving together again. Did you guys have a sweet little breakfast date before work? I kept my head down, feeling completely numb. At the institute, everyone thought Ethan and Harper were the perfect match. Childhood sweethearts, both Ivy League PhDs, the rising stars of the biotech world. Then the colleague gasped. Who said Dr. Miller doesn't know how to pamper a girl? Harper, is that the new seasonal Chanel bag? That's almost impossible to get. I looked up and froze. The bag on Harper's shoulder was beautiful. I had mentioned that exact bag to Ethan months ago. He had gone online and bought me a cheap, knockoff brand instead, telling me he was too busy to research designer bags. Yet, the authentic, limited edition Chanel bag was hanging on Harper's arm. Hey, receptionist, the colleague barked, snapping her fingers in front of my face. Can't you see Dr. Miller and Dr. Vance are discussing work? Go make some coffee. Show some initiative. I snapped out of my daze, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. On it, I murmured, rushing to the break room. But as I was serving the hot coffee, Harper got overly excited during their discussion. She flung her arm out, knocking the cup straight out of my hand. The scalding liquid spilled down my arm and onto my shirt. The pain made me gasp, my face turning white. Ethan immediately shoved me aside and grabbed Harper's hands, panic in his eyes. Harper, are you okay? Did it burn you? Once he was sure she was untouched, he quickly wiped down the documents on the table, checking every page. Only then did he look up at me, his voice dripping with anger. Can't you even serve coffee properly? Do you have any idea how important her hands are for our experiments? Oh, Ethan, stop. Are you worried about me or the data? Harper teased, pretending to be annoyed. Then, she noticed my arm, which was already blistering. She let out a soft gasp. Oh my gosh, Chloe is really burned. Ethan, go get the burn cream. Ethan finally frowned, pulling my arm over to inspect it. Seeing that no one else was watching, he gently blew on the burn and whispered, Does it hurt? Hold on, I'll grab the first aid kit for you. But I never got that cream. As soon as Ethan turned around, Harper dragged him into the clean room, and he completely forgot about me. After shivering in the storm and getting burned, I developed a raging fever by the afternoon. Maybe because I looked like death, Ethan did something he never did. He wrapped up his work early and offered to drive me home. My head was pounding. I decided that tonight, I would tell him the truth. The wedding was off, and I was leaving. Halfway home, Harper suddenly gasped, looking at her phone. Ethan, pull over. Dr. Hayes is giving a surprise guest lecture at UW tonight. It's about our exact research model. Ethan's eyes lit up. We can't miss this. Then, he hesitated, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. But, Chloe is sick. Maybe I should drop her off first. He checked the dashboard clock. No, traffic is terrible because of a storm. We'll be late if we detour. Chloe, you need to get out here and call an Uber. Don't worry, we'll come home right after the lecture to take care of you. Before I could even stand steady on the wet curb, the black Audi sped away into the rain. With a 103-degree fever, I nearly fainted on the sidewalk. It took me 2 hours to get home, soaking wet and shivering. The sink was still piled high with dishes from the weekend. Our genius scientists were too busy to do chores, so everything fell on me. Once I had asked Harper to help me hang the laundry. Ethan had screamed at me for hours, accusing me of exploiting a brilliant mind for menial labor. Whatever. I was leaving anyway. I ignored the messy house and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed. By some cruel twist of algorithms, Instagram recommended a live stream of the UW lecture Ethan and Harper were attending. The technical jargon meant nothing to me. But during the Q&A session, Ethan and Harper walked up to the microphone together, holding hands. They looked like a power couple. The crowd in the auditorium started teasing them. The host smiled and asked, "Are you two a couple?" Harper grinned proudly. "Yes, we've been classmates since preschool. We even share the exact same research focus." A student in the crowd shouted, "You guys are so lucky. It must be amazing to have a partner who truly understands your mind." Harper nodded warmly. "Absolutely. If you're looking for love, make sure you find someone who walks the same path as you." Ethan spoke into the mic, his voice firm and clear. "I agree. Never tie yourself down to someone who is just a drag on your life."
A drag.
I let out a bitter laugh. Ethan and Harper both had mild Asperger's, which they used as an excuse to ignore basic life skills. In elementary school, they didn't know how to tie their shoes. I was the one who knelt down to do it. In high school, they couldn't navigate public transit. I held their hands and guided them. In college, I cleaned their dorms and took care of them when they were sick. To support my fiancé and my best friend, I had entirely sacrificed my own life. And in return, I was just a drag. By that night, they were trending on local social media. People posted their report cards from elementary school, their matching SAT scores, and their joint Ivy League publications. They were a match made in heaven. But in the corner of every old photo, there was always a tiny, blurry figure.
Me.
I closed my eyes and shut off my phone. The people who promised to come right home and take care of me never returned that night. The next morning, I wrote my resignation letter and walked into the institute. The moment I entered, the atmosphere was suffocating. Chloe isn't even that pretty. How dare she try to steal Ethan, right? I saw the video. She literally forced her way into Dr. Miller's car yesterday. Yeah, but she got kicked out halfway. So embarrassing. I opened WhatsApp and saw a leaked video in the company group chat. It showed me getting into Ethan's car yesterday, looking desperate, while Ethan looked cold and annoyed. I looked like a pathetic stalker trying to force myself onto a taken man. Just as I was about to type a message to clarify our relationship, Ethan posted in the group chat first. "Chloe is just our roommate. She is also Harper's friend. Please respect her privacy." With that one message, the office's contempt for me solidified. How shameless. Trying to steal her best friend's guy while living under their roof. I felt ice in my veins. I marched into Ethan's office and confronted him. "Why didn't you tell them I'm your fiancé? Why did you call me a roommate?" Ethan closed his eyes, his voice utterly cold. "What did you want me to say, Chloe? Everyone in the industry thinks Harper and I are together. If I deny it, what will they think of Harper? Do you have any idea how much gossip that would start? We just need to keep our distance at work from now on. Once we host the actual wedding and invite our colleagues, the truth will come out naturally." So he did understand how damaging rumors could be. He wasn't incapable of empathy. He just saved all of his empathy for Harper. But it didn't matter. There was never going to be another wedding. My last day at the institute was a night shift. Close to midnight, the building's fire alarms suddenly wailed. A thick, black smoke began pouring under the door.
Fire.
The fire had started on the second floor and was spreading rapidly. Within seconds, the smoke was suffocating me. Flames burst through the hallway, searing my arm. I collapsed near the exit, gasping for air. Through my fading vision, I saw someone burst through the smoke with a fire extinguisher. It was Ethan. "Ethan, I'm here." Pain and terror surged through me. I reached out with the last of my strength, grabbing the hem of his jeans like a drowning person clutching a lifeline. But he didn't even look down. "Harper, where are you?" he screamed, his voice raw with panic. Before I lost consciousness, all I heard was him screaming her name. I woke up in a sterile hospital room. The burns on my neck and arm were throbbing with agonizing pain. Every tiny movement felt like needles in my flesh. "It hurts," I whispered. Seeing Ethan sitting by my bed, a wave of grief washed over me. The pain of being abandoned in the fire made tears spill over my cheeks. "Why didn't you look at me?" My voice cracked. The air in the hospital room reeked of medical-grade disinfectant and burn ointment. Ethan didn't answer right away. He adjusted his cuff, looking anywhere but at the thick, sterile bandages wrapping my forearm and neck. "Chloe, don't be hysterical," he said softly, his voice carrying that familiar tone of mild condescension he usually reserved for children who didn't understand long division. The fire started near the second-floor research wing. Harper was inside the containment zone. If the flame hit the chemical storage, she would have died in seconds. "I was lying at your feet, Ethan," I whispered. My throat was raw from the smoke, each word feeling like crushed glass sliding down my esophagus.
"I
touched your leg." I was focused on saving lives. Ethan snapped, a flicker of irritation breaking. through his calm facade. You were near the emergency door. You were safer.
Why?
Do you always calculate things in terms of who I love more? It's not a competition. Before I could answer, the door swung open. Harper walked in. She was wearing a fresh pair of scrubs, her hair neatly tied back, holding 2 cups of artisanal coffee. She looked pristine and scathed. "Oh, good, you're awake." Harper beamed, setting a cup on the bedside table. "Ethan, Dr. Vance wants us back at the lab." The fire department cleared Sector B. "We need to check if the centrifuge parameters were corrupted during the power surge." Ethan immediately stood up. "Right now? What about the data drive?" "I grabbed it before we evacuated," Harper said with a proud little wink. "Told you I had fast instincts." Ethan let out a breath of pure relief, a genuine smile illuminating his face. A smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Harper, you're an absolute lifesaver." He turned back to me, tossing a set of house keys onto my blanket. "The doctor said you can be discharged by noon once your 4 finishes," Ethan said, pulling his coat on. "Take a taxi home. The house is a bit of a mess from the fire panic, so don't worry about cooking tonight. Just order takeout. We'll probably sleep at the lab to monitor the servers." Harper looked down at my bandaged arm, her expression softening into that infuriating, patronizing pity. "Poor Chloe," she cooed, reaching out to pat my shoulder, though she hesitated, as if worried my trauma might smudge her hands. "Get some rest, okay? Don't be mad at Ethan.
Science de mon sacrifice.
We'll make it up to you, I promise. Next month, after the grant submission, we'll take you out to a nice dinner." They turned and walked out together, their hushed, rapid debate about liquid nitrogen storage echoing down the corridor until the heavy double doors clicked
shut.
I stared at the keys sitting on my blanket. I didn't cry. The fire had taken my tears, along with my lingering illusions. An hour later, I pulled out the 4-needle myself. Ignoring the sharp sting of blood pooling on my wrist, I dressed in my smoke-stained clothes, signed my own discharge papers, and caught a cab back to the rented house. The house was cold. The sink was piled with moldy dishes. Ethan's laundry was strewn across the couch. I didn't touch a single plate. I didn't pick up a single shirt. I walked upstairs, pulled out my small suitcase, and packed only what belonged strictly to me: my worn-out clothes, my high school diploma, my mother's old watch, and my laptop. I left behind every dress Ethan had ever bought me, the cheap, off-the-rack garments he picked up when he felt guilty, and every piece of decor I had purchased to turn their empty shell of a house into a home. Finally, I walked into the master bedroom. I pulled off the simple silver engagement ring Ethan had given me 3 years ago, a ring he had bought secondhand because he said jewelry is an inefficient allocation of capital. I placed the ring on the center of the kitchen island, right on top of their unwashed coffee mugs. Beside it, I placed my official letter of resignation from the institute. I dragged my suitcase out the front door, slammed it shut, and didn't look back. 2 days later, I was sitting in a quiet, sunlit apartment in downtown Chicago. My old university professor, who had always lamented that I threw away my administrative talents to play house for Ethan, had offered me an operations manager role at a private biomedical research firm. The pay was double what the institute had paid me, and for the first time in 7 years, I had my own space. Meanwhile, back in Seattle, the storm was just beginning. Ethan stood in the middle of the kitchen, his brow furrowed in deep annoyance. It was 8 a.m. His white dress shirt wasn't hanging on the bedroom door, freshly ironed. The kitchen didn't smell like dark roast coffee and toasted bagels. "Chloe," Ethan shouted toward the stairs. "Where are my notes for the board meeting? And why isn't the car warmed up?" Silence answered him. Harper walked downstairs, rubbing her eyes, wearing a grease-stained hoodie. "Ethan, where's the almond milk? And why does the house smell like rotting garbage?" Ethan walked into the kitchen and froze. The sink was still overflowing with the dishes from 4 days ago. Flies were buzzing around the trash can he had ordered Chloe to take out on Tuesday. And there, gleaming under the fluorescent kitchen light, sat the silver ring. Beside it was a note written in precise, unyielding script. "I'm not your maid. I'm not your safety net. And I am no longer your fiancé. Clean your own mess." Ethan's face went pale. What is she playing at now? Harper picked up the ring, scoffing. Is she seriously still throwing a fit about the fire? Ethan, she's being completely unhinged. She knows we have the NIH grant deadline this Friday. She'll be back, Ethan muttered, though a strange, tight knot was forming in his chest. He pulled out his phone and dialed my number. The number you have dialed has been disconnected or changed. He tried WhatsApp.
Blocked.
He tried Instagram. Account deleted. She changed her number? Ethan swallowed hard, a rare flash of panic flickering in his eyes. She actually left. Let her leave, Harper said, rolling her eyes as she searched the pantry for food, finding only empty boxes. She's a receptionist, Ethan. She has no money, no connections, and no career without us. Give her 3 days. When her bank account runs dry, she'll come crawling back, begging you to take her back. Ethan stared at the ring in his hand. The metal felt ice cold. Yeah, he whispered, trying to convince himself. She has nowhere else to go. But when they arrived at the Biotech Institute an hour late, chaos greeted them. The front desk was unmanned. A line of international delivery drivers, government inspectors, and prospective investors was spilling out into the lobby. Dr. Miller, the lab director, barked, marching over with a face red with fury. Where is Chloe? The FDA auditor has been waiting for 2 hours. Where are the cold chain transport logs for Sector C? Chloe isn't here today, Ethan stammered, feeling exposed for the first time in his life. She took a personal day. A personal day? The director roared. She manages the entire compliance filing system. Neither you nor Dr. Vance know how to access the encrypted server
Logs.
You two can barely remember to sign your own timesheets. For 7 years, Ethan and Harper had believed they were geniuses floating above the mundane realities of the world. They had believed their brilliant minds were all that mattered. They had never realized that the only reason they were allowed to soar was because I was standing beneath them, catching everything they dropped. A month passed. My life in Chicago blossomed. The burn scars on my arm were fading under professional treatment, leaving faint, silvery lines that reminded me not of pain but of survival. My new boss appreciated my efficiency. My colleagues spoke to me with warmth and respect, and for the first time in my adult life, I went to sleep without agonizing over someone else's schedule. In Seattle, however, the golden couple was falling apart. Without me to organize their lives, Ethan and Harper's existence had devolved into absolute squalor. Their rented house smelled of sour milk and damp laundry. Neither of them knew how to run the complex washing machine, resulting in Ethan ruining 3 expensive suits. They lived on greasy takeout, which left them sluggish and irritable. More importantly, the lab was falling into ruin. Harper, accustomed to having me handle all the tedious material procurement, ordered the wrong purity grade of enzyme for their flagship human trial simulation. For 3 weeks, they ran trials on a flawed compound. When the error was finally discovered during a peer review audit, 6 months of work and over $400,000 in grant funding were completely wiped out. How could you not check the chemical grade? Ethan screamed at Harper in the middle of the open plan lab, his hair disheveled, deep dark circles under his
Eyes.
Me, Harper shrieked back, her pristine image entirely shattered. That was Chloe's job. She was supposed to verify the vendor receipts. Chloe left a month ago, Harper. Ethan roared, slamming his fist onto the stainless steel desk. You said you could handle the logistics.
You told me she
Was useless. She was useless. Harper spat, tears of frustration leaking down her face.
She
Was just a glorified secretary. You're blaming me for her abandoning us? She didn't abandon us. Ethan yelled, the truth finally bursting out of him, like poison from a wound. She abandoned me. Because of you. Because every time she needed me, I chose you. The entire lab went dead silent. Harper stared at Ethan, stunned. What did you just say? Ethan slammed his laptop shut, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked around the messy lab, at the angry faces of his colleagues, at the piles of unfiled paperwork, and finally at Harper. Without Chloe's quiet, gentle presence buffering between them, Ethan was finally seeing Harper for what she truly was: selfish, arrogant, and entirely incapable of caring about anyone other than herself. And in that moment, the terrifying weight of what he had thrown away hit Ethan like a physical blow. He didn't miss a receptionist. He missed the girl who had loved him when he was nothing. The girl who had held his hand when he was terrified of failure.
the
Girl he had left to burn in a fire. Ethan grabbed his coat and walked out, leaving Harper standing alone in the lab. 3 months later, the Midwest Biomedical Innovation Summit was held at the grandest convention center in Chicago. It was the premier event of the year, attended by top investors, Nobel laureates, and industry leaders. I was there as the lead operations coordinator for my new company, wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit, my hair styled elegantly, holding a tablet as I directed the event flow. Chloe, the keynote speaker from Harvard is ready, my assistant said, respectfully. Shall we initiate the opening slide? Go ahead, Marcus, I smiled smoothly. And make sure VIP seating is cleared for the panel at 3. As I stepped off the main stage, a voice shattered the atmosphere, a voice I hadn't heard in half a year, trembling and desperate. Chloe? I stopped and turned slowly. Standing at the edge of the red carpet was Ethan. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost significant weight, his suit was wrinkled and ill-fitting, and his eyes were bloodshot and hollow. Beside him stood Harper, looking equally battered, her former arrogance replaced by an anxious, twitchy hostility. Ethan took a step toward me, his hands reaching out as if trying to touch a
Ghost.
Chloe, it's really you, he breathed, a sob catching in his throat. I've been looking for you, for months. I went to your old college, I called your
Parents.
They wouldn't tell me where you were. I held my tablet against my chest, my expression entirely unreadable.
Dr.
Miller. Dr. Vance. Welcome to the summit. Please ensure your badges are visible at all times. Dr. Miller? Ethan flinched as if I had struck him. Chloe, please don't.
Talk to me like that.
I know I screwed up. I know I was blind. He rushed forward, ignoring the security guards who shifted uncomfortably. Nearby, I kicked Harper out of the house. Ethan rambled desperately, tears spilling over his cheeks. We aren't working together anymore. The trial failed. The gram was pulled. Everything went wrong because you weren't there.
I
Realized, I don't care about the science, Chloe. I don't care about any of it. If I don't have you. Ethan, what are you saying? Harper gasped behind him, her face twisting in outrage. You kicked me out because the board suspended you. Don't drag me into your pathetic groveling. Ethan didn't even look at her. He dropped to his knees right there on the polished marble floor of the convention center, in front of hundreds of high-profile attendees. Chloe, please, he wept, grabbing the hem of my trousers just as he had ignored me when I grabbed his jeans in the smoke. Come home. I'll give you the wedding you wanted. A huge wedding. Anywhere you want. I'll buy you the Chanel bag. 10 of them. Just come back to me. I'm dying without you. The entire lobby went dead quiet. People were staring, whispering, pointing their phones. I looked down at the man who had been my entire world for 7 years. I looked at his desperate eyes, his trembling shoulders, his pathetic, performative grief, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not vengeance, just an overwhelming, beautiful emptiness. Ethan, I said, my voice steady, clear, and ringing through the silent hall. He looked up, a ray of pathetic hope shining in his tear-stained eyes. Yes, Chloe? Yes. You didn't miss me because you loved me, I said softly, leaning down slightly, so only he could hear the full sharpness of my words. You missed me because your maid quit. You missed having someone build a pedestal for you to stand on while you stepped on her head. Ethan froze. You told me that in your world of science, I was just a drag. I continued, my eyes cold as ice. You left me in a burning building because her hands were too important to get scorched. Look at my arm, Ethan. I pulled back my sleeve, revealing the long, silver-burned scar running from my wrist to my elbow. The crowd gasped. Ethan stared at the scar, his face draining of all color until he looked like a
corpse.
You left this on me, I said quietly. And now you want me to cook your pasta. Again? Chloe, I didn't see you. I swear I didn't see you. Ethan sobbed, clutching
His head.
You didn't look, I corrected him. And that was your choice. I straightened up, turning to the security guards. Security, please escort these two out of the hall. They are disturbing the keynote presentation. Chloe, no.
Chloe.
Ethan screamed as 2 large guards hoisted him up by his arms. He kicked and thrashed, weeping like a broken child. I love you. Chloe, I
Love you.
Harper tried to slap one of the guards, screaming about her credentials, but they were both unceremoniously hauled toward the glass exit doors there. Pathetic cries fading into the Chicago wind. I adjusted my jacket, took a deep breath of the crisp, clean air, and turned back to my assistant. Marcus, I said calmly. Let's begin the next session. 6 months later, I sat in a cozy cafe near Lake Michigan, sipping a hot caramel macchiato. The autumn sun was golden, casting long, peaceful shadows across the pavement. My phone buzzed with a news notification from the Biotech Trade Journal. Former biotech prodigies Ethan Miller and Harper Vance stripped of research licenses following audit into data fabrication and mismanagement. I skimmed the article briefly. After the fiasco in Chicago, Ethan and Harper's professional relationship had exploded into a series of ugly lawsuits. Harper accused Ethan of sabotage. Ethan accused Harper of intellectual fraud. The institute fired them both, revoking their laboratory access. Ethan had reportedly sold his Audi to pay his legal fees and was now living in a tiny studio apartment outside Seattle, working as a lower-level data entry clerk, the very kind of mundane, repetitive job he had spent his life despising. Harper had moved back in with her parents, her academic career permanently blacklisted. The geniuses who thought they were gods had finally been pulled down to earth by the very hubris they cultivated. I closed the browser tab. I didn't feel joy at their ruin, nor did I feel pity. They were simply strangers who belonged to a life I had long since outgrown. Chloe, a warm, bright voice pulled me back to the present. My friend and colleague, Clara, walked up to my table, sliding 2 tickets across the wooden surface with a triumphant smile. Got them. Front row seats for the symphony tonight. Clara beamed, sitting down and taking a sip of her tea. And after that, we have dinner reservations at that upscale Italian place you've been wanting to try. Sounds perfect, I smiled, holding the warm coffee cup in my hands. By the way, Clara nudged me playfully, that senior manager from the engineering department, Julian? He asked me if you were attending the company gala next week. He said he'd love to reserve a dance with you. I looked out the window at the shimmering blue waters of Lake Michigan. For 7 years, I had believed that love was about sacrifice, endurance, and disappearing so someone else could shine. I had believed that being second best was the best I could ever hope for. Now, I knew better. Love wasn't a lab experiment where one person was the scientist and the other was the lab rat. Love was standing side by side in the sunlight, unhidden, unashamed, and safe. Tell him, I said, turning back to Clara with a genuine, radiant smile, that I'd be happy to save him a dance. The storm had passed. The fires had burned out. And for the first time in my life, I was finally the main character of my own
Story.